Hello everybody, welcome back, welcome if you're new here. I hope this video was worth the wait because today we are going to talk about the Phantom of the Opera theming of Wednesday Season 2. That somehow is a thing now. I don't know how, and also I don't know why it's so dark in here. I mean, it's cloudy outside right now, but whatever, I guess it sets the mood. So, let's get this thing started. Let's start at the beginning. 2024. In the latter third of the year, I was hit with two major bouts of cinematic nostalgia. It's September, I saw Beetlejuice in theaters, and as someone who grew up fondly with Tim Burton's work, but found herself distanced from it in recent years, to the point that when Dumbo came out in 2019, it may be a bit sad to realize that I legitimately didn't care. I realized just how much I missed having it in my life. From the moment the opening credits began, I felt my heart filling with joyous disbelief, especially when my dad leaned over and whispered to me, "Well, of course Danny Elfman did the score," and then I whispered back, "Of course, it's practically a given at this point." And it stunned me to know we were talking about this again, like the enjoyment never left. I came out of the theater feeling what I can only describe as nostalgia in its purest form, with a balloon in my chest so full that when I got home and had some privacy, I went into the bathroom and happy cried for a bit, and I'm probably one of the only people who can say they did that after watching Beetlejuice. So, yay! 3 months later in December, I found out Gerard Butler, the man behind my first Phantom of the Opera, and subsequently my first celebrity crush, made his notable return to movie musicals by voicing as Santa Claus/Saint Nick in the animated feature The Night Before Christmas in Wonderland on Hulu. I was so excited to know that he was doing this in time for Phantom 2004's 20th anniversary that, yes, I got teary-eyed over that too. And I made a couple of YouTube shorts of myself reacting to it to help spread the word. Also, funny enough, nearly every time I'd say that title out loud, 8 times out of 10, my mouth automatically wanted to say nightmare instead of just night. But while I was grateful to have been given both of these incredible experiences, not once did I think they were connected, that it meant something involving them both becoming 2025. And yet somehow, it did. See, Wednesday fans who came into the season previously unfamiliar with Phantom don't get just how surreal this is. To see the words, "From Visionary Tim Burton," against the iconic Phantom of the Opera theme, followed by masquerade and gondolier imagery. Add in the fact that set within the confines of an Addams Family story simultaneously, and I have to ask, where in the depths of fanfiction.net did they dig up this crossover? But as someone who grew up fondly with all three thanks to my mom, my reaction was a cross between Will Ferrell screaming, "Phantom! Oh my God!" and Jack Skellington crying out, "What does it mean? What does it mean?" And in my infancy of Phantom love, I'm fairly certain that my preteen self wondered, what if Tim Burton made Phantom? But if you told me to picture that concept with the Addams Family mixed in too, the best I'd probably come up with is the Addams Family go to the opera, become fascinated with Eric's mayhem, and somewhere Danny Elfman cameos as performer saying something along the lines of, "Welcome to the opera, ladies and gentlemen, where weird shit is undoubtedly bound to happen," or something along those lines. I don't know. And during this time, I've amassed a collection of various associations between Phantom and Tim Burton and Danny that at this point, I'm going to have to make a separate video to explain their full significance. But without further ado, if you please, allow me to be your Jack Skellington and let someone who's been pretty much trained since birth to appreciate something like this walk you through it. Because it's been fun to read fan speculation on who the Phantom might be this season. And guess what? You're all correct in my eyes. It basically took the Scooby-Doo stage fright approach and gave us multiple Phantoms, only with 5 instead of 4, and they're each intended to represent a different side/farce to Eric's multi-layered character. First, swig of water. Hang on. Alright. First, Isadora Capri, the teacher. Isadora Capri is hired as the new werewolf head of music for Nevermore Academy, which already feels pretty blatant, and we first meet her when she walks in on Wednesday playing Dance of the Nights from Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet. Wednesday recognizes her name, that she's a child prodigy known for composing the classical album Wolf Howl at just 10 years old. 10 years old! And Capri insinuates she was inspired by the heroics of Wednesday and her friends to come teach there, much to Wednesday's chagrin. It leads to a very Eric-esque conversation on Prokofiev's composing technique, calling it deceptively cunning and the need to, quote, feel the notes, not anticipate them. Wednesday argues she plays for her own fulfillment, but Capri counters with, quote, but music doesn't seem to fulfill you. Capri also says that Wednesday should stop trying to control it, to succumb to its beautiful chaos, and again, Wednesday argues by saying that she causes chaos, she doesn't succumb to it. Another important statement from Capri before Wednesday storms out is, your pain is the only thing that made your performance interesting. She also ends up hosting a musical therapy session with the patients at Willow Hill, just as Wednesday and her friends were trying to learn the truth about Lois, / having to bust out an undercover Fester. That's really about it with her, because she ends up providing more to Enid Sinclair's and then later Tyler Galpin's arcs as the season goes on. However, when Wednesday gets alerted in 2X05 that Capri has integral experience with hides, she ends up serving as more of a Madame Giry figure, going by the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, by explaining her relationship with a hide artist named Alfie, but only after Wednesday forces it out of her. She states how she didn't know of his true nature, only that they were in love, and his master, who also had feelings for Alfie, ordered him to kill Capri. He turned on his master to save her, but because male hides can't survive without a master, it eventually led to his premature death. Put a pin in this conversation. We'll revisit it later. Barry Dort, the Extortionist. In a way, you could argue that the initial introduction of Barry Dort is presented like how Andre and Fiamen, the new managers, take over the Opera Populaire. Dort is introduced greeting Wednesday upon her arrival at Nevermore, thrilled to have been hired as the new principal in the wake of Larissa Weems' death in Season 1. He even makes the point of telling Wednesday in 2X05 how determined he is to cast out the memory of Weems' tenure from the minds of the students and donors, not knowing Weems herself is present as Wednesday's spirit guide, and she's understandably disgusted to hear him disregard her legacy. Eric gets increasingly pissed at the managers for refusing to engage with him adjacent. Side note, we also find out through both him and Wednesday that there are apparently more secret corridors inside the walls of Nevermore besides just the Nightshade's library, because budget increase. At first, Dort is initially pretty chipper in his dedication to breathe a new sense of community and strength into Nevermore, even openly presenting Wednesday and her friends as scrappy heroes who save the school, which only Wednesday finds abhorrent. And before we go any further, yes, there are several notable Trump comparisons to his character with how he promotes himself, some more blatant than others. From Tower. And as I learned a couple years ago, Trump is a notable Andrew Lloyd Webber fan, so ha 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 ha. However, the more nefarious layers to his character quickly come to light as he speaks with Bianca Barclay, recruiting her under the guise of uplifting the outcast community. Although weary of his pointed interest in her being a siren, she does want to help generate positive change for outcasts, and is honored to do so alongside a decorated alumni like Morticia Addams. However, things quickly go south when Dort directs her to use a siren song to influence Morticia into calling her mother Hester Frump for a donation, and under the threat of her potentially losing her Nevermore scholarship. Bianca immediately fights back and uses her siren song to instead deter his attempt to coerce her, but it's revealed that he has an antique pocket watch imbued with Corinthian coral, a siren-resistant property, and a disheartened Bianca is forced to use her power on Morticia as directed. From this point forward, Dort continues to act all supportive and go-lucky to the other Nevermore students, with only Bianca, and then soon Ajax Petropolis, knowing of his darker intentions, leading to Dort gaining even more leverage when he learns her mother Gabrielle has been hiding out inside the school. Using Bianca's voice for his own personal means is definitely Phantom-esque, plus her own voice is the one with the hypnotic and influential power. As much as I really don't like relating this topic to the Phantom of the Opera story, as it was never part of Gaston Leroux's novel, yes, this is a grown man grooming a child to achieve his goals for him in a way in which he is unable, which unfortunately is a trait that a lot of people took away from the 2004 movie and attributed to Eric and Christine's dynamic. Gee, thanks, Lord Andy. I blame him for that choice more than I do Joel Schumacher. I love the film dearly, but that element will always be one of the criticisms I most understand people having towards it. Anyways, Dort's manipulation of Bianca reaches a head in 2X07 when she's forced to siren an unwilling Hester into giving up her fortune to Nevermore, and she learns with horror that Barry Dort is in fact the real mastermind behind Morning Song, the cult she and Gabrielle previously escaped, and Gideon, the man she initially thought was in charge, was as much of a puppet as she is. Once again, Dort hid behind someone else. One he point-blank illustrates in a flashback has a face more charismatic and attractive than his own in order to achieve success. He even outright refers to Gideon in the present day as the mask he is now unafraid to burn, which, by the way, Christine also does in the LaRue novel, burning Eric's mask to prove she's unafraid of his face. And what makes it even sadder is Bianca explained to Ajax how Morning Song's original intent had been to help outcasts, and Gideon was grooming her to take over for her mother. So to see her realize she'd become trapped in it by it again under similar circumstances makes you feel so bad for her. Although she keeps this new development from Ajax and tries to tell him to back off for his own safety, he immediately knows something is wrong and calls upon Wednesday and Enid for help. Wednesday sees fully the problem at hand when Hester cheerfully flaunts her newly made decision to the Addams family alongside Dort, and right after she'd already discussed with Wednesday her plan to let him grovel it out before breaking the man's spirit. She confronts Bianca under the guise of a fencing duel and gets the truth, but gets immediately sirened to forget it all. Luckily, Wednesday anticipated this ahead of time and had a witness to reiterate, so she assures Bianca at the school's Masquerade Gala fundraising event to trust her and her friends to take care of things. Dort, who thinks he's got it all in the bag by this point, notably enters upon a motorized gondolier with Hester seated before him, symbolizing the power he currently has over her, given its direct parallel to Christine being boated through Eric's world in the stage show. However, he is soon distracted by Agnes, DeMille, and Enid's dance performance, long enough that Agnes, who can turn invisible, sneaks away during Enid's solo part to steal his pocket watch and give it to Wednesday, all while Ajax frees Gabrielle. Once free to use her power on him again, Bianca sirens Dort to admit his grandmaster plan to all the partygoers, including his roping in of Hester and Morticia, both of whom are stunned by the reveal. With the truth unveiled, Ajax turns him to stone, and to cap it all off, Dort is killed by a falling chandelier he accidentally shoots during the chaos, a fate which we see pleases Wednesday immensely. Hell, my first reaction to finding out that this happened, because I actually read about an article before I watched the show, because actually I hadn't had Netflix yet, that's a whole other story. So my first reaction to finding out this happened was to clap, cheer, just go, Timber killed his villain with falling chandelier! Everybody else can go home! So I relate to Hester's in-universe reaction to applaud, exclaim, bravo! At it. And to bring things back to how Dort was hired as Weems's replacement, one whom she comments with relief turned out so horrible it gave her own legacy a boost. His death actually connects nicely to Gaston Leroux's original incorporation of the chandelier in his novel. Following its release after Carlotta performs Faust instead of Christine, and Eric ruins both her performance and career with the inexplicable toad sounds, this was the fallout from it. Quote, "The papers of the day state there were numbers wounded and one killed. The chandelier crashed upon the head of the wretched woman who had come to the opera for the first time in her life, the one whom Monsieur Richard had appointed to succeed Madame Giry, the ghost box keeper, in her functions. She died on the spot." Yes, in the book, on top of not having Christine sing Marguerite, the managers replaced Madame Giry with someone far less caring and qualified than her, and Eric makes his thoughts on that decision quite clear to them in his Opera Ghost note. But their refusal to engage on either matter leads to the bringing down of the chandelier, killing two birds with one stone, and one of them literally, just like with Dort. Well played, Tim! Well played. Agnes DeMille, the Stalker. The first season ends with Wednesday discovering she has a stalker on her way out of Jericho, and upon her return in 2X01, Wednesday is quickly alerted they're still around. The first move is to set up Wednesday to have to retrieve her novel from inside the Founders Day pyre before it's set alight, which she only barely achieves, but it comes to a head on prank day in 2X02. The stalker kidnaps Enid and her new crush Bruno, with a trapped thing, unable to see who took them, and whisks them away to Iago Tower, leaving Wednesday only a set of riddles to try and locate them. One of these riddles involves the big-ass fancy organ in the music room, which, funnily enough, Wednesday only realizes after she talks to Miss Capri. Wink, wink. And the double entendre of the phrase, play dead, where she has to play the notes D, E, A, D on said organ. While cool enough on its own, personally, I actually thought back to the Scooby-Doo Where Are You episode, A Night of Fright is No Delight, which also boasts an organ riddle that the gang has to solve, only with the word feed. Does anyone else remember that? And it's actually been noted by some, it sounds like the opener to the overture for Potos, so how cool is that? Once Wednesday and Thing arrive, she's given one last task when Thing accidentally trips the ceiling of knives to start descending upon Enid and Bruno, and she has to grab the right book title in order to stop it. Said title ends up being The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, another member of the Universal Monster lineup, by the way. And the stalker reveals herself to be Agnes DeMille, a member of Wednesday's fan crowd we saw when she first returned to Nevermore. Now, before we go any further, let's acknowledge Agnes's elaborate use of traps. Something Torture Chambers / Maze of Mirrors creator Eric would undoubtedly commend her for, especially for a 13-year-old. Yes, she says she had help from some Da Vinci's she blackmailed to put it all together for her, more on them later, but we could gather that the concept of said traps was all her own, which she explains was inspired by the workings of Wednesday herself, to match her in wit and deception in the hopes of becoming her friend. From this point forward, Wednesday ends up in the middle of a rivalry between Enid and Agnes, sort of like an all-girls twist on the Eric-Christine Rowell situation, if you will, even to the point that, similar to a scene Eric does to Rowell in the LaRue novel, Agnes reveals to have been watching Enid in her room while she was with Bruno, and naturally, Enid was ready to take her out right then and there. Not to mention Agnes being flat out excited when she initially catches wind of Enid's potential death. Now in 2X06, when Wednesday and Enid accidentally switch bodies, Enid as Wednesday learns about both the vision of her death Wednesday was keeping from her and how badly Agnes wants Wednesday to break off their friendship. So she lets Agnes have it, causing Agnes to go to a school support group for students who don't feel whole, literally. She confesses how much she hoped to make friends at Nevermore, but feels more invisible than ever. But it doesn't stop her from pulling one last attempt at a Wednesday move by getting herself directly embroiled in the Galpin Knight family villain plan, resulting in her needing to be rescued. In other words, she doesn't do much to change her actions until Wednesday makes her look in the mirror and have introspection. Ha ha ha, look in the mirror. Much like Eric not giving much of a shit about his own misdeeds until fed-up Christine starts calling him out on it. She takes things too far in 2X07 by dressing like her supposed idol after she serves as the aforementioned witness to the Bianca situation, and naturally, Wednesday is disgusted. When Enid finds her and When Enid finds her and lends a sympathetic ear, Agnes explains how her aim all along had been to be everything Wednesday would want in a friend, someone just like her down to the last detail, while clearly failing to see that what makes Wednesday and Enid's friendship, generally, work so well is it been built on a foundation of openness and individuality. Enid encourages Agnes to, quote, be her own psycho, and after the two of them share a laugh after Agnes admitting to stalking her dance rehearsals, Agnes dons her own hair and dress style, showing a character growth even Wednesday shows approval towards, and joins the plan to stop Principal Dort at the gala, leading to her successful retrieval of the pocket watch that prevented him from being sirened by Bianca. One final thing we learn about her is that she's a child of divorce, adding to the apparent Nevermore necessity where you can't enroll without some sort of parental issues to attest for. She sees herself as the mistake that kept her parents together longer than their sell-by date, with their mom having moved on from her and her father to start another family, but feels assured by the burgeoning friendship she now has with Wednesday and Enid. Such friendship becomes even more apparent when we find out she secretly ditched getting picked up by her dad and sees Wednesday be buried alive at the Skull Tree, prompting her to alert Enid. She tries in vain to warn Enid against wolfing out at the risk of it becoming permanent due to her alpha status, but Enid sadly replies that she can't let Wednesday die. The small exchange between them shows how far they've already come since their initial interactions, to the point Wednesday even trusts Agnes to track after Enid as long as she can, which can't really be said of Eric and Raoul unless we look at the ending of Love Never Dies. But we're not going to do that. Moving on. Water break. Isaac Knight, the genius. Isaac's story is first told to the audience via Ajax's reciting of the tale of the Skull Tree during the premiere, stylized as an old Nevermore legend meant to frighten and indoctrinate the students arriving at Caliban Hall, including a newly enrolled Pugsley. This scene, illustrated in spectacular stop motion that if you say didn't put a smile on your face, then I don't trust you, is very much in line with the magical lasso sequence when Joseph Bouquet weaves false claims to the Phantom, that are actually pretty in line with how he looks in the book, to scare the ballet girls. However, it is then Pugsley who becomes the Joseph Bouquet figure, eager to go to the Skull Tree and dig up the truth because Addams mentality. Speaking of Bouquet, this version of Pugsley would definitely be the kind of character who think that Bouquet's dead body dropping during Il Muto would be sick as hell. He'd be like, whoa, the Phantom of the Opera dropped a stagehand in the middle of this performance and he's dead? That's awesome! Unfortunately for him, he had no Madame Giry there to warn him away from the idea, and his emerging electrokinesis raises Isaac from the grave, though initially he is only known as Slurp the Zombie. Ugh. The name just gives me the ugh. It just grosses me out. Much like, say, several newer incarnations of Dracula, Isaac slowly begins to regenerate into his former guise with each new brain he consumes, until he ends up looking, dare I say, fine as hell. Very much perpetuating the trend of casting the most attractive actors to play characters perceived in the narrative as disgusting, such as in Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom, and yeah, no, Gerard Butler was not the only attractive man to play the Phantom in Schumacher's film, okay? Calm down, people. And the fact that he goes from horror zombie to handsome goth prince could be applied to how the Phantom in general has gone from the faint-inducing Lon Chaney in 1925, yes, that's a true story, look that up, to the purposely made sexy Gerard Butler in 2004. Hell, I even said of Owen Painter as Isaac that there's something so Gerard Butler in his hot Y2K Universal Monster era about him, in reference to both Phantom 04 and his stint in Dracula 2000, and I'm pleased to see a fair amount of people on Twitter understood what I meant by both those posts. And yes, I did just quote myself. Haha. Isaac is a breed of outcast called a Da Vinci, boasting telekinesis, heightened creativity, and intelligence, to the point he even successfully crafted a mechanical heart to combat his chronic heart condition, and was hailed as the, quote, the greatest mind to ever walk the halls during his tenure at Nevermore. He was said to have died in an accident in Iago Tower, which includes a notable explosion destroying part of the building and leaving it abandoned, hint hint. But no one ever knew how. Not until the second half of the season, where, naturally, the Addams family are revealed to have been involved. Wednesday learns through Isaac's old student file that Gomez was his roommate and confronts her parents over it. Morticia says, Gomez was the only one who could charm his way into Isaac's clockwork heart. And he in turn explains how he tried to protect Isaac from those who would exploit him for his genius. People like former Normie science teacher Augustus Stonehurst. Although who thought Isaac was the key to his secret experiments of transferring outcast abilities onto normies. However, this is not the full story, and by the next episode, Morticia must now also serve as the Madame Giry analog when Wednesday demands she, quote, unburden herself of the truth for all their sakes. Morticia explains how, despite Isaac and Gomez's friendship, Isaac wanted to use Gomez's electricity powers as fuel for his machine that would free his sister Francoise from her hide side, killing Gomez in the process. Morticia destroyed the machine to save Gomez's life, but it took his electrokinesis and instead killed Isaac, and they buried him under the skull tree at Stonehurst's behest. Now that he's back and reunited with Francoise, aka Tyler Galpin's mother, Isaac wants to try again, this time with Pugsley, who, in a way, is his own Christine where Isaac is concerned, because Pugsley's main motivation upon arriving at Nevermore was the hope that he would actually make a friend. Between that line and the fact that we see him get bullied in Season 1, We can gather he was lonely in a way he probably didn't often express to his family, and by the time he brought back Isaac, he quickly noted being left out and isolated from his dorm mates. This including Eugene Ottinger, who, despite agreeing to room with Pugsley on account of his friendship with Wednesday, was probably turned off by A. Pugsley calling it awesome that he has PTSD from his near-death experience with the hide, and B. the comment about potentially eating his pet bugs, and busies himself with his newfound popularity instead. It's undoubtedly why Pugsley clings onto the idea of protecting Slurp for a while, despite his clear inherent danger. Plus, the whole reason he's lured in by Isaac to be kidnapped for the final episode is because, in 2XO5, Gomez directly apologizes for not having been around much for him due to Morticia's gala responsibilities and everything surrounding Wednesday, and 2XO7, when Eugene inquires after Pugsley leaving the gala early, he says he doubts his family would even notice him being gone, his face showing a clear frustration to be feeling this way, and the first person to discover him out in the woods by himself is Isaac. So like Christine, Pugsley reached out for comfort amongst the supernatural and made contact with an obsessive, corpse-like genius who, largely, saw him only as a means to an end. Please don't make this weird, guys, she says after I found a 2-minute edit of Isaac and Pugsley set to Phantom while I was working on this. Oh my goodness. Anyway, Isaac has a confrontation with Professor Orloff where Isaac requires a part he needs after he accuses Orloff of, quote, living on borrowed time for 30 years thanks to his invention. Which, I won't even lie, heavily reminded me of Gerard Butler's Dracula facing Van Helsing and saying, you stole life from my blood and passed it to another. And after the destruction of the initial transference machine at Willow Hill, Isaac shows up at Nevermore's Venetian masquerade, dressed as Red Death. Oh my god. Specifically, the more attractively constructed Red Death costume from Joel Schumacher's Phantom, with even Isaac's hairstyle resembling that of Butler's black wig. And also, to me personally, some quiet reminders of old Kim Boggs' outfit from Edward Scissorhands as well, if I'm being honest, which, by the way, I have since found out that movie took some influence from Chaney's Phantom also, so yay! Here, because I want to show you guys. Let me just, because this is a big deal, probably one of my favorite elements of the season. Showing here. Oh, you see that? Okay. So, while I know a lot of fans have been attracted to him on the basis of him resembling a live-action Victor Van Dort from Corpse Bride, that's the part that had me blushing and going, woo! So thank you, Tim Burton, for throwing us Jarrett Gurley's a little bone there. Appreciate it. Although he's only in it for about 2 scenes, boo! He's there for a reason. To make like Eric and, as mentioned, abscond with a chloroformed Pugsley, who leaves his gala mask behind for Wednesday and Eugene to find, nod to the iconic end of the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, and thus prompting the Addams family to have to find and rescue him. And in the LaRue novel, Rollo does bear witness to the rather triply described sequence of Christine being whisked out of her dressing room by Eric after the masquerade, so that lines up too. But probably the most melodramatic, Phantom-adjacent thing that Isaac does is in the final episode, when haughtily asked how he plans on recovering his work, with multiple dramatic flourishes, he uses his power to reconstruct the Iago Tower laboratory, I almost said library, laboratory to its former glory to the tune of Toccata and Fugue in D minor. For those who don't know, it's the da-na-na, da-na-na-na, that one. A music of the Isaac Knight, if you will, but If that doesn't scream Eric's type of theatrics, then I don't know what does, and I couldn't stop smiling during it. Not that Tim Burton hasn't effectively used melodrama before in his work, of course. I mean, he adapted a musical about cannibalism, for goodness sake, and keep in mind, he actually did originally want Edward Scissorhands to be a musical because it felt, quote, big and operatic to him. But IDK, this scene being so unabashedly theatrical probably just hits different in the wake of the creative stifling he was experiencing with Disney by the time he finished Dumbo, and these past few years have been about him finding his passion again. Something you can definitely clearly tell between both Beetlejuice and here. And knowing more about Owen Painter's background a bit on how he grew up a Tim Burton fan and was a high school theater kid with, no joke, even a stint in the Addams Family musical at the time. I've no doubt he was absolutely living during the sequence. Truly an inspiration to our generation. And I, like so many others, hope Tim Burton keeps him around. Freakishly enough, I actually apparently used to live and go to high school only 40 minutes away from Owen Painter. So, Owen, if you're watching this, greetings from a fellow Connecticut native. And, yeah, then I have to think about it. I just go, a kid I was this close to attending high school with attracts me by dressing up like my first celebrity crush. I'm not sure I want to know what that says about me psychologically. Okay. Ooh, this one's going to be a long one. Another swig of water. Tyler Galpin, the victim, and true phantom. You heard what I said. Are you really surprised that I find him to be the real phantom in all this? The character Hunter Doohan says Tim Burton told him would be, quote, welcomed into a long line of sensitive monsters, the one of which whom, unlike the rest on this list, has been here since from the beginning, thus requiring me to talk both about Season 1 and Season 2. In Season 1, Tyler fits this sort of phantom backstory with one absent parent, and by having, through no fault of his own, earned his father's fear and loathing due to his nature as a Hyde, which causes him to transform into a powerful, violent monster. He spent so long not being aware of it, nor that it had been inherited from his mother Francoise, until he's approached by Marilyn Thorhill / Laurel Gates. He's lured in under the guise of her sharing her knowledge and wishing to assist him through it, only to be continuously captured and tortured until he's submitted to her as his master. As a result, he's already committed several murders by the time Wednesday arrives, and although initially presented to be a normie, is noticeably isolated from his peers, who, FYI for some of you out there, is supposed to be between 17 and 18 years old. Yeah, you know who you are. What's especially sad, though, is that he wouldn't have been accepted by the outcasts had he and his father Donovan attempted it, because we come to learn from Larissa Weems that Hydes, on the account of being too dangerous, were long ago barred from Nevermore Academy. An outcast in a school full of outcasts, a line said by inciting plot victim Rowan in episode 1, but can also allude to a further double meaning about the Hydes. So safe to say, Tyler had nobody to turn to except his master, not until Wednesday, to a degree. As Wednesday learns during her Hyde research in 1X07, they are artistic by nature, which causes her to first accuse Xavier Thorpe, but without considering the artistic modes of flirting that Tyler does for and towards her. Prime examples: learning latte art to write happy birthday on her quad, baking a cake that would match her preferred color palette, and this was without knowing about her color allergy, by the way. And then the coup de grace, the morbidly yet sweetly romantic cryptid he sets up for her, which includes the black dahlias he gives her, paralleling Eric's iconic black ribboned roses for Christine, the 2004 movie, and the day itself almost resembling the infamous picnic date that Eric takes Christine on through his dreamery in the 1990 miniseries, which you can find on YouTube and watch, by the way. Which notably ends with Christine convincing him to remove his mask and fainting at the sight of his unseen face, forever altering their interactions. Ending to Wednesday 1X07 in anybody? And upon further inspection, you get the impression that, after meeting Wednesday, he yearned not just for a connection with her, but for her understanding. Excuse me. As someone recently forced into monsterhood, Tyler, by chance, meeting in a Wednesday a town outsider who thrives in the darkness and macabre, must have brought him some much-needed comfort, especially since their first meeting involves him comparing the espresso machine as a, quote, a temperamental beast with a mind of its own, which is a subtle foreshadowing to his nature, and one which only Wednesday can fix. However, he also quickly comes to see that, like him, there's more to her than the darkness, especially when she gets vulnerable with him and admits people don't normally engage with her the way that he does. Insert no one would listen from Phantom 04 here. But even so, he's willing to let that go and help her leave like she originally wants, saying at least one of them would be able to escape. Like Eric, you could argue that in the same way he felt confined to live only in the opera cellars, Tyler felt mentally and physically unable to leave Jericho, which undoubtedly had to do with his ties to Thornhill. However, he's happy to find Wednesday will be sticking around after all, and it's important to note how he expresses a quiet joy with Wednesday's growing interest in the hide, complimenting her with, "You're really becoming obsessed with this whole monster in the woods thing." He wanted her to continue learning about the hides, to recognize it, to the point he was probably rattled to finally see what he looked like after she found Nathaniel Faulkner's diary. And on that night Wednesday showed up at the weather vane, the way he lets her take her time to timidly approach him, the smile on his face after she kisses him. Safe to say it's probably the happiest we'd seen him all season, to feel like he'd been actively chosen by someone, anyone, but especially by the girl he wanted most to understand him. That is, until he's unwittingly and unsympathetically unmasked by the onset of Wednesday's psychic vision, and she flees from him, now no longer able to see him as she once did. And this being after he catches her during the vision, by the way, something he does twice that season in a very Eric-type maneuver. And even after he somewhat gleefully proves Wednesday right about her vision in secret, you still get this sense of sadness and regret in his tear-filled eyes as he walks away, clearly mourning the fact that she will undoubtedly reject him now, which only gets sadder once you dwell on the what-ifs. In Season 2, Tyler has been sent to Willow Hill following the reveal of his crime spree, his father Donovan discharged as a result, and his house debased with inflammatory graffiti, clearly now hated by the majority of Jericho. But the first time we truly see him again is when Wednesday visits him for answers in 2XO2, which surprises yet also pleases him immensely, saying, "I knew you couldn't resist seeing me again." Safe to say he's in full hide mode during this conversation, although it is a bit hard for me to take it seriously since he's shirtless in it. Not just for Hunter Dewin saying that he watched it over thinking, "Oh my god, Jesus Christ," but also reminds me of when Gerard Butler was trying to claim, "The world showed no compassion to me" at the end of Phantom 04, and you're just sitting there like, dude, you clearly have abs. Shut up. Although inundating him with the news of his father's murder, Tyler keeps most of his attention on Wednesday, and the fact that Jenna Ortega herself had to say how she and Hunter were trying not to make the scene sexually charged, but just couldn't help it, should tell you something. He taunts her with the promise of going after Enid, but she wins the conversation with her claims of how she plans to enjoy his fade away into mediocrity. Mediocrity. I can speak. The next time we see him is when Laurel Gates gets transferred to Willow Hill and attempts to convince Dr. Fairburn that he needs her. While led to believe she still has a hold over him, Tyler knows damn well she's the reason he's even there in the first place. And like we see Eric do in Jiri's 04 movie flashback, kills his abuser who tortured and caged him. Following this act, he ends up doing 3 major Phantom things. 1. He escapes to a sewer, of all places, where he accuses a hallucination of his father for living in fear of and avoiding him. 2. Sends Wednesday a bouquet of dead roses at the hospital with the supposed promise of going after her and Enid. Which, interestingly enough, in the 04 film, there's a scene where Christine receives the Phantom's rose intercut with him stalking Bouquet, acting almost as a harbinger to the encroaching murder that'll force her to evaluate her conflicting feelings towards him, as well as the red and black roses she finds waiting for her in the stables when she plans to visit her father's grave. And number 3, adorns himself with a 1943 Claude Rains-style Phantom cloak to attend the Day of the Dead festivities at Nevermore. However, even when he thinks he has Enid cornered, it's only Wednesday he cares about finding, and although pushed to transform by the Nightshades, he listens to her when she gets his attention and seems perfectly willing to allow her to master him. That is, until suddenly Tyler is inundated with the revelation that his mother Francoise is still alive, having been held at Willow Hill all this time. Momentarily, all suddenly seems well, until he quickly learns she wants to be more so his master than his mother, and sees her be far more excited about reuniting with his long-lost Uncle Isaac than him. Not only that, But he quickly starts to serve more as a tool and asset to their grand plan as opposed to family, to the point that he's even the only main cast member to not be seen attending the masquerade. Boo. Even so, Tyler shows a clear sympathy and understanding for her wanting her hide side removed due to it deteriorating her health, and is relieved when the blood transfusion he undergoes keeps her alive when her medication runs out. Similar to how Eric generally still holds caring and sympathy for his own mother, in spite of her obvious mistreatment and fear of him. It comes to a head, however, when Wednesday gets caught by Isaac when she goes to save Pugsley, and Tyler is helplessly forced to watch Isaac bury her alive, painfully slowly, and with her silently locking eyes on him the whole time. And what's worse, once he's forced to leave her behind and go to Iago Tower with his mother and uncle, he finds out Francoise has been conspiring behind his back to have his hide removed instead, believing it to be too late for herself. He pleads with her not to do it, but to no avail, and when a rescued Wednesday arrives on scene with her family, he does the only thing he thinks he has left. He asks her to kill him. By this point, Tyler's been consistently ignored, abused, betrayed, then incarcerated, treated as something to be either feared or utilized, with even a reunion with the mother he thought dead being marred by what he is and what he's capable of. He thinks he has nothing left, and to be killed by someone whom he fully believes will go through with it, by someone whose loss of caring undoubtedly stings the most, is the best way to go. Only, she doesn't kill him. To his complete shock, Wednesday uses her axe to release him instead, thereby keeping him alive. And when he asks her in a broken voice, "Why?" she simply replies, "I missed." And although it leads to a fight with Francoise following his understandable retaliation against Isaac, he still holds his hand out to save her, to stay with him, only to be forced to have to watch her blatantly choose death instead. Tragedy upon tragedy with this kid, I swear, but that's in line with Eric for you. His arc ends with him being approached by Isadora Capri, offering her knowledge of hides and a commune where he could be amongst others like him. Although wary, in the end he chooses to go with her, finally leaving Jericho like he always wanted, but tinged with tragedy, because he has nothing left now to hold him there following the loss of both parents and the town's viewing of him as a monster. Plus, we don't know what happened to his dog, but hopefully he passed of old age. Think of it like the ending of the 2004 movie, where a weary-looking Eric exits his lair through a secret passageway, closing the curtain behind him on what he once considered home before the mob can reach him. And I find it interesting how the season is capped off by the music teacher Phantom reaching out to the victimized Phantom, offering a potential balm to soothe his isolation. Oh my goodness. The same way music did for Eric over the course of his life. We can only hope now that Capri is to be trusted, because so many of us Tyler appreciators refuse to see him being taken advantage of anymore, especially by older women. So please, let Capri be a trustworthy figure. For the love of Pete. More water. But now you're probably asking me, well, how does Wednesday fit into all this? It's her show. I'll tell you how. When it comes to Wednesday, safe to say she plays the part of both Raoul and Christine this season, depending on which of her relationships we're talking about. However, that's not meant to insinuate at all that she's like an ingenue, because I know she'd beat my ass for that. She'd probably go, "Would you not rather have your precious little ingenue?" And it's like, "Wednesday, no! The world's got you!" Like Christine, she gets stalked by Agnes, although, being Wednesday Addams, she finds a way to turn it around and have it work to her benefit, letting Agnes do what she can to appease and be accepted by her. While Enid, Wednesday's real friend, whom she genuinely cares for and wants to protect, is left frustrated and confused, to the point she questions the nature of their relationship, especially given how much Wednesday chooses to keep in the dark from her, much like Christine did trying to protect Raoul from harm in the book. Speaking of which, I initially thought Enid haughtily saying things like, "I figured after what happened last year we'd be closer, but it seems you want to hang out with that pint-sized psycho more than me," or "Do you even still want to be my friend?" were a bit harsh, especially with how a surprised Wednesday responds, that's never been in question. But then I realized, no wait, this is actually pitch perfect Raoul behavior. Especially if we're talking about LaRue Raoul, who spends the first half of the novel acting really petty and whiny. Example, what had she said? In the name of their love? Never before had she confessed that she loved him, and yet she had enough opportunities. Oh, pooh. Her only object was to gain a few seconds. She wished to give the Red Death time to escape. However, I give Enid a much bigger pass than him because A, we know how much she values Wednesday already, and with the boy trouble she's already been going through, now she fears the possibility of losing her friend on top of that, and B, after enduring Agnes's so-called prank, Enid has the right to be upset Wednesday's keeping her around, whereas Raoul was acting this way before he got caught by Eric. However, in 2XO5, after Wednesday learns how it would be possible for her to master a hide, she becomes a swiftly determined Raoul with a foolhardy plan to catch the monster by recruiting the Nightshades through Enid's initial influence and playing his game, that game being Tyler's supposed claim that she and Enid would die on Dia de los Muertos, her favorite holiday. But it requires someone she's been working to protect this whole time to act as the bait. So Enid becomes the Christine in this scenario. Hell, she even narrates during her research this episode, genius and madness make strange bedfellows, which is almost perfectly in line with Patrick Wilson's role saying in the Schumacher movie, genius has turned to madness. A line I didn't catch until about my third rewatch, and I love to imagine her just doing, we have all been blind, and yet the answer is staring us in the face. This could be the chance to ensnare our clever friend. We're listening, Wednesday, go on. We shall play his game. Performance work, but remember we hold the ace. For if Enid is the bait, he's certain to attend. We are certain the Nightshades are there. We are certain we're armed. The curtain falls. I'm gonna master a hide. And they're like, wait, no, Wednesday, what are you doing? But when the plan actually goes into action and Wednesday faces Tyler, she very quickly switches to her true and most emotionally rooted role this season, the Christine to his phantom. Jokes have been made about how Morticia straight up tells Wednesday, don't court this monster. And the scene being set up like a wedding ceremony, what with it being held inside a chapel, bearing witnesses, Wednesday's coaxing words delivered almost like vows, and then presenting the syringe that would ultimately bind them. But in phantom terms, it's the closest we get to these two having their own little point of no return sequence. Cloaked and secretly infiltrating a very public performance despite knowing police are on the hunt for him, Tyler went into this thinking he had the upper hand, but it's Wednesday who takes charge by the end, strolling up to him unafraid and having him in her thrall, to the point she performs the soon-to-be botched marriage proposal, and one he doesn't seem to be against all that much, judging by his body language. And I even set Wednesday's words in the scene to the All I Ask of You tune and tell me they don't work. She goes, we both know I'm the one you really want. What if I lied about my feelings? But, yeah, you were right, I was attracted to you. But you know there's only one way we could be together. Tyler, say hello to your new master. Oh, and then they get caught by Fred Swanson like, oh no, another ugly monster, you! Instead of the unmasking. In hindsight, this makes sense. Because one of my predictions in between part 1 and 2 was that Wednesday's feelings towards Tyler would shift from the tears I might have shed for your dark fate grow cold and turn to tears of hate, to God give me courage to show you you are not alone. And ultimately, that is what comes to pass. She won't admit it, but her frustrations and lingering feelings about Tyler start to affect her musically, to the point Capri recognizes the pain apparent within her cello performance of Dance of the Nights from Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet. She tells Tyler at Willow Hill that the thought of him locked away, fading into obscurity, quote, makes her dark heart grin. And while learning how to master him following the revelation from Capri, she flat out tells Weems she hates Tyler. but Weems reminds her that hate is a feeling, as much as fear, contempt, concern, and love, all of which Wednesday thinks she could just box up and lock away, something her own grandmother even encourages. However, the fact that she's even willing to do this shows she cares enough about Tyler to not want him to die, which is what being masterless would ultimately do to him, and she could have just as easily let that happen if she truly did hate him. Yes, she attacks him when she becomes a werewolf briefly and has to be talked down from it by Enid, similar to how Christine had to stop Raoul from killing Eric in the cemetery in the 04 film, but the season's final events force Wednesday to confront her true feelings. That, as Tyler pointed out to her at Willow Hill, she's been lying to herself. Firstly, she goes to the masquerade in a black dress so many of us have agreed bears an almost uncanny resemblance to Emmy Rossum's morning dress for Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again back in 2004, complete with gauzy scarf hood. Hang on. Show again. This is my... First, just if you're wondering, this is my movie companion booklet to the 2004 film. Birthday gift from my mom. Here. Showing here. See? Tell me Jen Ortega doesn't resemble that. While I would certainly never question the intent of costume designing legend Colleen Atwood, who said its intention was to be Oscar Wilde inspired, I also feel like it's no accident that, in hers and co-designer Mark Sutherland's effort to make it more feminine and stand out, it came out looking like a Christine Daae dress. Which to me helps allude to the most crucial role Wednesday serves in the show's finale. But first, a quick aside. A few more costumes. Oh, that gave me Schumacher movie reminders as well. Pugsley's black and white jester costume resembles one notably worn by an extra during the masquerade dance. The silhouette, neckline, and sleeves of Morticia's dress give an air of Madame Giry's, played by Miranda Richardson, who was in Sleepy Hollow for Tim Burton, wink wink, nudge nudge, and also alludes to the phantom role she will take on in the finale. And Enid's white feather mask reminds me of Meg Giry's, played by Jennifer Ellison. Yay! After watching the season over a few times, I've developed a theory about the season's phantom theming. While Tyler is the phantom of the bunch who's been here since season 1, his presence and storyline aren't nearly as predominant as the rest, particularly when it comes to Agnes and Isaac. Not a knock on Hunter doing it all, it's just how it looks like when viewed inside the bigger picture of season 2. In hindsight, that makes sense, as it was the victimized outcast side of Eric he always tried best to hide, not just behind his mask, but behind the facades of the opera ghost, the angel of music, etc., so it translates onto Tyler coming off as less significant than the other Phantom characters. But at the same time, since that version is ultimately the core of him, it was never meant to be defeated, only subsided. While Wednesday fashions dramatic ends for extortionist Dort and genius Isaac because there was no other way, and Stalker Agnes is gently pushed not by Wednesday but by Enid to face up to her misguided attempts at approval before gaining the acceptance she seeks, Wednesday responds to Tyler's plight by performing her most emotionally pivotal response to him thus far, setting him free. And unlike in 2XF4, this time it was on purpose. Though her main goal of the Iago Tower is to save Pugsley, she ends up going to Tyler first, and finds him distraught, in pain, and asking her to kill him. She raises her axe high, but freezes suddenly, her wild eyes softening a touch, before ultimately bringing it down upon his bonds instead, stunning him. He asks her, why, in a broken, confused voice, and though she simply replies, I missed. Surely most people can tell it was said with the air of someone refusing to acknowledge the real reason. That reason being what led to Christine setting Eric free in the musical, her compassion for him. Interestingly enough, during a conversation with Hester Frump in text 2X07, Wednesday remarks how neither of them have, quote, an iota of compassion inside them, that it's, quote, one of their most endearing traits. And yet here she is, seeing in Tyler a boy she supposedly hated, broken and begging to die, and she won't follow through. And because Hunter is such a great actor, his eyes in the scene very much echo the sentiment, yet in his eyes all the sadness of the world, those pleading eyes that both threaten and adore. With even Wednesday unable to help being moved. What's more, the story was built up to be leading to this. At points during her investigation throughout Season 2, she'd have little moments where Tyler were entered her thoughts. Like when she shines her flashlight on a picture of Tyler and Donovan fishing at the cabin in 2X03, or when she finds out about the outcast experiments for Lois in 2X04, and she suddenly remarks to Fester saying, "This is what Galpin was worried would happen to Tyler." Hell, even look at Season 1. Ajax noted how she burst out of her cocoon when she showed up at the Raven with Tyler. She told Enid she felt like she was evolving shortly before her first kiss with him, and then in 2X01, in the wake of her returning to Nevermore while Tyler is at Willow Hill, she notably says, "I don't evolve, I cocoon." The whole season has been her unraveling her feelings for him in the wake of his Hyde reveal, and being made to realize that, as Weems first told her, not everything is as black and white as she would believe, that there are shades of gray, even to her own emotions. As a result, she fulfills what Dr. Fairborn had hoped she would be, the psychological shock that Tyler needed to begin his recovery, just as Christine's kiss was the psychological shock that led to Eric realizing his failures with her and letting her go. And given how episodes 7 and 8 are what feature the majority of the phantom-heavy aspects of the entire season, and are 2 out of the 4 directed by Tim Burton himself, it feels good to think that probably at least 3/4 of what I'm saying were crafted intentionally by him. Haha. Alright, now we get to the personalized conclusion section. Probably the most gratifying part of this whole experience has been getting to see how many Wednesday fans have begun tuning into Phantom the Opera as a result. I never thought I'd see the day when fans were being converted by a Tim Burton project, but here we are. Like Jack coming outside and seeing the denizens of Halloween Town making Christmas, on the basis of seeing people inside a similar circle, get into my years-long hyperfixation on a somewhat mass scale, da-da-da-da. I was just like, I don't believe what's happening online! Oh, I just bumped into something. My hopes, my dreams, my fantasies! It's like, woo. Excuse all the hand-waving. Shit. Oh. First, there was a thread I found inside the Wednesday subreddit 4 months ago that said, I've been completely fascinated by the Phantom of the Opera ever since I saw the trailer for Wednesday Season 2. That music simply captivated me. I've already seen the movie, and now I'm dying to read the book. I simply love Tim Burton's gothic influences. And I was like, oh my god, my heart. That alone was enough to make me giddy with the feeling of one who's, quote, been here for a while. But then the plethora of TikToks that followed after part 2 was released. Oh my god! And it's especially pleasing when they used the 2004 soundtrack audio. I'm sorry, naysayers, but it just feels right, okay? Of course, it then prompts one to ask, how does Tim Burton feel about that movie? Hang on. How does Tim Burton feel about this movie? I understand he and Joel Schumacher were friends, to the point Joel apparently had lunch with him to make sure Tim was okay with him taking over Batman, so I like to think he at least respects the movie, if not entirely enjoying it, and that he used Wednesday Season 2 to pay tribute to the film's impending 20th anniversary in honor of his late friend, as Joel Schumacher passed away in 2020, for those who don't know. It's between that and the fact that he is undoubtedly nerdy enough to know that the Lon Chaney silent film... Hang on. This one turned 100 years old this year. For the reason why Phantom was included in Wednesday... Oh, I worded that awkwardly. After all, there's been almost no discussion about it from Tim or Jen or the showrunners. Only an answering fan mail video starring Emma Myers, Georgie Farmer, and Joyce Sunday, where thankfully the hosts were good enough to choose one that mentioned the usage of Phantom the Opera in the trailer, and through it, I found out Phantom is one of Emma Myers' favorite musicals, which is awesome. I was like, yes! So far, it's the closest I've had. Somehow, though, those two Phantom flicks reaching major milestones aren't the only ones, because two of my favorite Burton films growing up, Corpse Bride and Charlie the Chocolate Factory, each turned 20 years old respectively Then last month, I found out 2025 marks 40 years of Tim Burton and Danny Elfman's collaborative friendship, which admittedly made me emotional. And I realized it's been 10 years since the last birthday / Halloween that I spent with my mom, who taught me to appreciate their partnership from a young age as I was learning to enjoy Tim Burton films. And speaking of which, I apparently found out that Tim Burton was born the exact same week as my mom. They were born the same week at the end of August, only 1 year apart from each other. I did not write that sentence well. I did not edit that sentence. Oops. The point is, that's cool as fuck. My mom, the one who regaled me with stories of how she'd run home from school to watch the Addams Family and wish she could have been a part of their clan. Who taught me to love Tim Burton from a young age. Who told me about how she cried seeing Phantom of the Opera on Broadway the first time. I was so excited to see middle school me develop an interest in it that she was the one who bought me this booklet for me when I was 11, along with a plethora of posters. In fact, this Jack Skellington dress that you see right here, this is actually one of the last ever birthday presents that she gave me for her sweet 16th, which I suppose turned out to be poetic in hindsight. Between that and Wednesday, I resolved to really try and embrace the Halloween spirit this year in her honor because, safe to say, Astrid Deeds from Beetlejuice 2 talking about how much Halloween had lost some of its magic for her over the years after her dad died was painfully relatable to me. I even went to Spirit Halloween for the first time in a long time, which is where I got this... things are falling. Which is where I got this shirt. And among other things, I also got this lanyard, which has a little cello on it. Oops, flip it. Oh my god. Okay. Here you go. The little cello on it. And this... Oh, something else fell. And this Corpse Bride journal. How cool is that? While I think my mom would have had mixed feelings on Wednesday overall, I do think she would have been over the moon at the uniquely strange concept of Burton, the Addams Family, and Phantom coming together, and certainly would have been happy for me being so excited about it. My dad, who's been watching Wednesday with me and has become a fan of it himself, asked me why I thought she wouldn't like it, and I'm just like, Dad, you weren't there for the dark times that were the Dark Shadows 2012 incident. Because I'm sure this will surprise nobody, but my mom was a big fan of that soap opera, and she did not like that movie. Ay. Yep. She hated that movie version so bad, she didn't even want me to bother watching it. And I do remember her saying, she's like, I can't believe Tim and Johnny, Deb, would do this. Because, yep, I had a baby boomer mother with a vast interest in the gothic and the horror and the macabre that she passed down on to me, her Gen Z daughter. And I swear, there needs to be a t-shirt made for those of us in that generational category, because there's just something so uniquely special about that to me. So, I got that done, and yeah, that's part of the reason why this video took a long time, is because this ended up meaning so much to me at the end of the day that I kind of kept editing, going back and making changes, taking things out, and adding things, and then a couple things I even realized I needed to make a separate video for, like just how badly the internet over the years has wanted Tim Burton and Phantom of the Opera to come together. So that's going to be a separate video, and I hope people will look forward to that. And I also want to make a compilation of Wednesday Phantom of the Opera TikToks now that I have found, and add a little commentary to those, because it, like I said, it is so beyond surreal that it's a thing, and everyone was yapping about it. So, yeah, if you told me 3 years ago that Wednesday and Phantom of the Opera were going to come together in its second season, I would have thought you were nuts, if not incredibly imaginative. But here we are, and yeah, I want to thank everybody who's been watching my Wyler video. It's At the time of making this video, it's over 500 views. Thank you very much. I hope a lot of people enjoy this, Wylers and Claire's alike. And yeah, I look forward to what's happening in season 3. And this has been good. Not really sure what else to say, except thank you very much. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I hope you all have a very happy Thanksgiving.